seems obvious that if most people are eating the standard American diet now, we've completely wrecked our gut health. I think a lot of people notice that they feel better when they're eating in Europe because the food is fresher and it may not have the same pesticides.
Why no leftovers?
Basically, when it's in the fridge, it's like building up histamine. So if you freeze it, it stops the histamine buildup. It like causes symptoms like itchiness, allergies. It can also cause gut issues. There's more and more research coming out about food allergies and the gut microbiome, and they're looking at, what happens in your gut when you're a baby, and a lot of children have food allergies now. We know that like the gut microbiome from the mom gets passed to the baby, so if we're not taking care of ourselves before we have children, then that can cause issues.
Hey everyone, today we have a wonderful episode of the Gut Check podcast with Lauren Less, who has an incredible page called Less with Lauren, focusing on recipes that are gluten-free, dairy-free. We dive into her health journey and how you can eat wonderful food that's seasonal, delicious, and easy to make. If you've been looking for recipes that are healthy and easy for you and your family, check it out. Lauren, thank you so much for joining the Gut Check podcast. It's awesome to have you with us today. I thought it would be a great place to start just on your background and what brought you to running your Instagram page and sharing the information that you share today.
Thanks so much for having me. I am a food blogger and a wellness entrepreneur. I live in Chicago, and I started sharing my recipes when I was diagnosed with several food allergies and then also several like chronic health issues. So I just kind of started sharing what I was making and eating and some like different parts of my wellness journey. And then it kind of just grew from there.
So a few years ago, you decided to completely overhaul your diet. What happened?
Yeah, so I was diagnosed with several IgE food allergies, so I had to remove those foods from my diet. And up until I was like 25 years old, I could pretty much eat whatever I wanted. So it was like a very drastic change for me. So I had to get pretty creative with things.
Yeah, this is one of the reasons that I was really wanting to have you on the show, is because your story is unfortunately common for so many people, right? Men and women, but it's becoming more and more common. You have a background in clinical social work, right? So did you ever have an interest in nutrition?
Not necessarily. I really liked to cook. I always cooked with my mom growing up, but I never really knew very much about the profession. I feel like it's hard because you go to college and you don't know unless you know. And now I think about it all the time and I'm like, oh, if I knew, maybe that's what I would have studied. And I do think about going back and getting a master's in nutrition. That's something I would really like to do.
Yeah, I mean, these chronic diseases, right? These immune diseases, chronic conditions, one of the things that's so unfortunate about them is how they make people feel. They feel so hopeless. So with your conditions, when you found out that you had them, what did you decide, how did you decide to take the next step? And how did you settle on a diet being the key linchpin?
Like I had to remove the food allergies, so that was like not really something I couldn't do. But as I learned more about diet and nutrition, because I had to start, because I had the food allergies, I had to start reading labels. And then once I started reading the labels, I started learning more about what's in our food. And then I started learning more about what's in our products. And from there, I started learning, how to basically fuel my body and use food as medicine.
Were you surprised, you get this food allergy diagnosis? Were you surprised when you started reading labels what was in the food that you were kind of commonly eating?
Yeah, kind of. I never really ate like the standard American diet, but I had I would eat some things from it. I think, we're told that certain foods are bad, but I didn't really know to the extent of like what was going in them. And I think it's more so that like these foods are not actually food.
Yeah, that's exactly right. I mean, there's so much processing, there's so much that's being added to the foods that we don't know about. Was there a food or a food group that was really causing you a lot of issues?
I think just like gluten, dairy were the main ones that were causing me a lot of issues.
And so, okay, so that's something I wanted to kind of dive into a little bit deeper because, you hear this so commonly that, there's so many people, children, adults that are having these gluten and dairy allergies and this growth in them. It's been frankly quite exponential
Mm-hmm.
over the last 50 or so years. Have you researched that? I mean, why do you think that that is?
Well, I mean, there's more and more research coming out about food allergies and the gut microbiome, which like I think is everything. It's just we're kind of waiting for the research to really catch up and tell us that that's the case. And they're looking at, what happens in your gut when you're a baby. And, a lot of kids have food allergies now. It's less common. My situation is less common where I just developed allergies at 25. A lot of children have food allergies now, but they are learning more and more about that. And we know that like the gut microbiome from the mom gets passed to the baby. So if we're not taking care of ourselves before we have children, then that can cause issues. And I mean, there's not enough research to back that up, but to me, it kind of seems obvious that if most people are eating the standard American diet now, we've completely wrecked our gut health. And now we're all having babies. Um, the babies aren't going to have very good gut health either. Like we're just kind of starting them off in a not so great place some of the time.
Yeah, that's exactly right. One of the most critical windows of opportunity that we have to impact human health and the future of human health is the first 1,000 days of life. So it's conception to year 2. That's
Mm.
this critical window. And it's critical, obviously, for the gut microbiome development, exactly what you were talking about, right? The development of the microbiome that happens when you're pregnant and then is passed down through birth. It's a very good point. You've been mentioning this a couple of times, and I think it'd be helpful to dive into it. When you're saying standard American diet, what does that mean?
I think just like a lot of processed food, a lot of ultra processed food is kind of what the standard American diet is made up of.
Yeah, and it's this interesting thing when you talk about gluten and dairy, and I don't know if this has happened to you, but this happens to me all the time. And you say, if someone has a gluten or a dairy allergy, and then they talk about going to Europe, right, or traveling to Italy during the summer, and how the gluten doesn't bug them there. They could eat pasta all they wanted or had bread. Why does that happen?
I think a lot of people notice that they feel better when they're eating in Europe because the food is fresher and it may not have the same pesticides. It may not have as many pesticides. I think
Hmm.
the way that they cook their food is different there.
Yeah, totally. So let's get into just, I think one of the core problems of this in general, allergies or not, the health of Americans right now, one of the core issues is that a lot of people aren't cooking at all. So
Yeah.
would love to hear your thoughts on that because I don't think there's an easy way around this. We love quick fixes and we love, easy fix, and I just don't think there is here. And I think it's something that we have to really celebrate and prioritize and treat it as if it's a life force because
Right.
cooking and food that we eat truly is a life force.
Yeah, I think it is important to have the why behind it too, like
Mhm.
to help people feel motivated to do it because they're caring for the health of their family or they're trying to improve their health. Having that why is important. But also, I think meal prepping is really helpful and like one pan meals, sheet pan meals, and also just kind of like meeting yourself where you're at. If that looks like just adding a veggie that's frozen and you like put it in the microwave, like that's better than nothing. Just trying to add some color to your meals in general.
Yeah, absolutely. I was just interviewing another guest last week about polycystic ovarian syndrome, right, which is
Mm.
unfortunately super prevalent with women. And one of the first things she says is to everyone who she's working with is just try and cook your meals because even if you
Yeah.
just cook them at home versus door dashing them or Uber eating and eating out, even if you are cooking something from frozen veggies or something that is easier, that alone will be like a huge step in the right direction.
Yeah, right. We don't realize like how much extra stuff is added when you eat restaurant food. And that was
Yeah.
something I had to realize too, because once I had food allergies and I started asking what's in this, there's so much more in it than we really ever could imagine.
So let's talk a little bit about, you mentioned, the importance of gut microbiome. What did you learn about the power of the gut and how it impacts kind of our whole body? What have you learned through your journey?
Yeah, I mean, I've learned a lot just from like the therapy perspective about the gut brain connection, and that isn't something like you necessarily learn too much about in school, but just how important that is. And then also just like how important your gut health is to your immune system. And that's what I've dealt with chronic illness, is just doing gut health, like doing gut testing and really seeing where things are at and how that has impacted my health. And getting my gut health into a better place really changed my health. And I can like really see that because I got my gut health to like a really good place and I was doing way better. And then last year I got COVID and I have like tests from before and after. And it's like my gut health was good. And then after I got COVID, my gut health was wrecked. And so like I'm still like rebuilding from that. But it just goes to show that like your gut health really can impact so much.
Yeah, it's all so interconnected, and it truly is, a foundation of human health, right? So a lot of women
Mm-hmm.
don't know that you have a subset of bacteria called the estrobolome, which is responsible for estrogen detox, estrogen metabolism. It's a newer area of research, and it's just kind of
Interesting.
on the rise right now. Have you ever explored or looked at the dietary impacts on hormone health for women and just kind of how the two are interconnected?
Yeah, I've definitely read some books about hormone health and gut health, and have learned that my gut health is really intertwined with like my hormone health. And I think a lot of people don't realize that. They think like they need to heal their hormones, but they like you kind of need to look at your gut health first.
Hmm. Have you looked at anything and looked at any of the impacts of like cycle syncing and eating differently for different times of your cycle? Is that something that you've dug into at all?
Something I have really done is like worked on supporting my liver so that it can properly process and detoxify everything, because I've done like Dutch tests, hormone tests, and seen that like my estrogen was high. I was estrogen dominant. And then another time my estrogen was low. And it isn't always like the hormones. It actually, for me, I think is more that my liver is having trouble processing things.
What are some of the things that you're doing specifically for liver health and to support your liver from a dietary perspective?
Like right now, I've just been drinking a lot of dandelion tea,
Hmm.
and just I was taking a lot of supplements before and kind of felt intuitively that it was too much. And I was like, I
Yeah.
feel like I'm asking my body to process a lot. So backing off from that has also been helpful. Um, I also do castor oil packs. What else? I mean, I do like infrared sauna for like whole body detoxification. And I think just eating, I'll eat like broccoli sprouts, um, and also just like, you know, exercising regularly, eating enough um, protein, getting enough sleep, managing stress, like everything really,
Yeah.
all the lifestyle factors are also important for our body to just like function the way that it's supposed to. And I think that's, people don't like really talk about that enough, like how important those like the basics really are. Everyone wants to take a supplement to fix their problems, kind of like Western medicine. Like there's become a supplement for every issue now, but if you don't have the basics down, it's, you know, it's, you're not really going to get anywhere. Also, I never really drink alcohol, which is something I forget about because I just haven't done it in so long.
I mean, that's exactly why I've loved your content and what you're putting out, because the reality is that the diet, right, and what we're eating and having recipes that are easy and fun and needless to say, delicious, right? They
Mm-hmm.
taste good. Having, easy access to content creators that are doing these things is so important right now. Not only does it encourage someone to cook and make it fun, but you're right that you can't supplement your way out of a bad diet. And I say
Right.
that all the time, right? And a good example of this is fiber. You can't supplement your way out of not eating enough fiber in your food. If you need a fiber supplement, you can get 3 or 6, maybe even 10 grams a day in a supplement. But anything above that is going to make your stomach hurt. And the reality is for women, we need at least 25 grams a day of fiber.
Mm-hmm.
And so you have to get that through whole foods and vegetables. I wanted to talk more about eating seasonally, because I know that's something that you share consistently. For someone who's maybe newer to that or is just kind of learning about, why someone should want to eat seasonally, can you explain to them why it's important to eat seasonally?
So I really do try to focus on eating seasonally. I think that the food tastes better when it's seasonal, and I also try to get food that's local whenever I can. It's also just like better for us because it's more nutrient dense. It hasn't traveled as far. Like if you think about it, the food that we're eating that's not in season has traveled usually like very far to get to us, and also might be like older.
And then as far as like eating locally, is that something that you focus on as, farmers markets? So seasonally and locally, how do you think about those two things together?
Yeah, I definitely try to shop at farmers markets, or like CSAs can be helpful too. There's different like delivery services that I'll use, where they just like drop off a produce box, which is really convenient. And I think that's something that a lot of people can do.
How do you look at also getting not only, probiotics via supplement, but also into your diet? Are there certain foods that you like or that you kind of lean towards?
So for me, because I have like histamine issues, I don't really eat foods that are rich in probiotics right now. I think like the blanket advice of eating like fermented food is good for most people, but anyone who has issues with like histamine intolerance or mast cells, it will make them feel worse. So that's kind of where I'm at right now with
Yeah.
probiotic foods.
What is histamine for someone who's never heard of it?
Yeah, so histamine is basically the way I explain it is it like causes symptoms like itchiness, allergies. It can also cause gut issues. That was like my main symptom, honestly. It's kind of what your body releases when it has some type of an insult, but you can also over release it. And then there's a bunch of, it's like one of the mast cell mediators. There's a ton of them. So histamine might not be your only issue. There can be a lot of different mediators that are causing issues, but it's allergy symptoms or gut symptoms. And there's actually such a wide variety of symptoms that it can be, that like mast cell activation syndrome can be causing, but histamine is usually one of the big ones, and that's like one of the big issues for me.
And so I saw on your website and through your content, you develop a bunch of different recipes. I mean, rightfully so, because you're dealing with this low histamine diet. What does that look like? What types of foods do you eat? What types of foods do you avoid if someone does have a similar problem?
Yeah, so right now I'm avoiding foods that are high in histamine, like things that are fermented. Like tomatoes are really high in histamine. It's also like a lot of the foods that we think are like that are objectively healthy that are high in histamine. And I was eating a lot of them before without knowing. So like kombucha, chocolate, avocado, things like that are really high in histamine. And might be beneficial for one person, but might be causing symptoms for another person. So right now I'm eating like pretty plain. And one of the biggest things is not eating leftovers, which is really annoying. But basically I just meal prep and I'm freezing all my food. This is something I just started eating low histamine again like a week ago. It is something that I did in the past that really helped me. And now I'm kind of doing it again to give my body a break and get my gut health back into a better place. But yeah, it's a lot of like freezing food. And for me, I like to make a lot of sauces so that my food doesn't like taste plain, and add a lot of herbs. And that's the best way I've found to do it. Otherwise, you're just eating like a sad piece of chicken. So I find that like adding flavor is really important.
Why no leftovers? What's wrong with leftovers?
It basically, when it's in the fridge, it's like building up histamine. So if you freeze it, it stops the histamine buildup. So that's like the best way to store things.
So going back to the start of your journey, you turned to social media, right, with your health journey. Why was that?
I just honestly was looking for recipes, and I didn't think I would ever post on a page, but I did. I really thought I would never share anything. And then I just started sharing back when Instagram was photos. I started sharing like gluten-free and dairy-free recipes and what I was doing. And then I started finding more people talking about their health issues. And I just kind of started sharing what I was going through, as I had no clue what was going on at that time. And I think honestly, social media really helped me put together some of the pieces in the beginning, along with obviously some really good providers. But that's kind of how I got started there.
What were some of the biggest things that you learned? I mean, bringing these issues to a larger social media audience, what were some of the learnings?
I found that there were a lot more people with food allergies and chronic illness and who eat gluten-free and dairy-free than I thought there would be. There really like are a lot of people, which makes sense because if you look at the numbers in America, our chronic diseases are increasing, our autoimmune issues are decreasing, and there really are so many of us now who are looking for answers or recipes or just like who want to feel better.
Yeah. What has been some of the most positive or helpful feedback that you've gotten from your recipes and from kind of all the content you've developed over the years?
I think like when I just get messages that I've like changed someone's life or that I've made their life so much easier, or like they say that just making my recipes has improved their health. You know, maybe they've gone from, like you said, eating out every day to just starting to cook at home, and they're using my recipes and they're telling me it's made a difference in my health. That's been really, or in their health, that's been really cool to see.
And was it that community inspiration kind of, that made this the full-time work for you? Was that the kind of why you decided to, commit to content creation full time?
Yeah, I think it's been really cool to connect with people and just be able to help people on a larger scale. Obviously, in a different, like, therapy is different than what I'm doing now, but I just saw that I was like able to impact so many more lives than I could while I was like meeting with someone one on one.
So, what are some of your personal top recipes? I'm sure there's tons, but what are some of the top recipes and what are some of the award winners within the community?
I really like, I make this like lemon chicken gnocchi all the time that I
Mm.
really like. And I also use the same sauce for like lemon chicken meatballs, and I like make that all the time. I also make like a green chicken enchilada skillet all the time. Some of the other top recipes, I would say, like people really like just like one pan, um, like steak fajitas. People really love desserts too, I would say. I think a lot of my desserts people like
What are
desserts.
some of the biggest myths about just cooking in general and that you find, when someone finds your page and finds your recipes, what are some of the myths or the surprises that the audience finds once they actually start cooking?
I think that people think that it's really hard to cook, um, and that not everyone can do it. But I don't think it's that hard. Like if you can follow a recipe, you can do it. And I think, everyone starts somewhere. You might have to look up how to do certain things before you can make a recipe, but there's somewhere that everyone can start when it comes to cooking. Like it doesn't
Yeah.
have to be hard or complicated. You can put meat and veggies and potatoes on a sheet pan and it can be like as simple as that.
So many people are struggling and they're finding a page like yours and it's encouraging to them because it's life-giving and it's fun to try a new recipe or whatever. So I think just if you have any advice for someone who might have food allergies or just really be struggling with their health and they might be overwhelmed, and frankly maybe the last thing that they're thinking about is cooking this long-winded Instagram
Right.
inspired meal, like what would you say to them and how could you encourage them, and what are some of the things that you would say, hey, start with this or not that?
Yeah, I think one of the things that I found the most helpful, honestly, is like finding other people who are going through similar things. And I think that's been like essential for me. And that is why I like my page so much, is that it's just like brought people to me that have so much in common with me that I can talk with, who really understand. Like honestly, I've met girls that I text every single day now, and they're across the country, and it's like they help you get through things because not everyone understands. Even like your partner who's there with you might not completely understand what you're going through. So I think connecting with other people who have similar issues or food allergies or whatever you're going through has been really helpful. And then just like starting where you can, starting with small changes and small things has also been helpful for me.
That's awesome. And then you ended up after this journey, right, founding Less with Lore, which is your page.
Mm-hmm.
And that's how I found you. Where do you see your journey going in the future? What's next for you?
Yeah, lots more recipe creation and continuing to share my wellness journey. I'm actually going to start a podcast with my friend, and I would love to write a cookbook in the future. I get asked about that all the time. I think I will get there eventually. And yeah, that's kind of where things are going right now. I would
And
love to make my own product at some point, some kind of allergy friendly product.
that's awesome. And where do you get inspiration when you're looking at creating a new recipe? Where does the inspiration usually come from? Are there different chefs or different places that you look for inspiration?
I think a lot of it comes from like what I used to be able to eat.
Mm,
So I like have a unique situation where I could eat anything I wanted before. So I'll always be like, how do I recreate this? How can I recreate this gnocchi dish? How can I make muffins? How can I make, a holiday recipe that's similar to what I had as a kid? So that's where I draw a lot of inspiration, and also definitely like from restaurants. Sometimes I'll go out to eat and either it'll be a dish I can get or a dish that someone else can get that I can't have. And I'm like, how can I make this so I can eat it? So that's kind of where I draw my inspiration from.
Yeah, and just kind of going back to your journey, because this is something really curious about, but did doctors ever explain to you, why things would suddenly change? Or was it kind of a journey that you had to figure out more by yourself?
So in 2017, I had like a horrible mold exposure at work, and that's around the time that all my food allergies started. So, like,
Mm.
I think that it was enough of an insult to my immune system that it just like wrecked all like my gut health, my immune system health, and kind of brought out some underlying like genetic issues that I have too. So that's my theory. I think there can be like for people who are more sensitive, like I am, there can be like I can look back and see like here were all my triggers that potentially could have contributed to like worsening my health.
Mold is a root cause of so
Mm-hmm.
many different issues, whether it be hormone disruption, right? We're seeing
Yeah.
that, food allergies, and it's something that unfortunately physicians, when they're going through medical school, really don't learn anything about mold. And
Yeah.
it's confusing which data that you look at, but it is somewhere between 25 and 50% of buildings in the US. So that's, workplaces and
A lot of
homes
them.
have mold
Yes.
exposure, right? So it's
Yeah.
very, very common. Did you notice when you were going through your journey any over reliance to treat with medication, or any kind of pushback on holistic or root cause fixes?
Like I took a lot of antibiotics, and I think that probably contributed to gut health too. As I was kind of figuring out what was going on, I was being thrown at like a lot of antibiotics were being thrown at me. But after that, after I got my diagnoses, I eventually found an integrative doctor, and then didn't really listen to anyone else. I kind of know now, like, okay, I'm checking in with the neurologist and the cardiologist to make sure everything's okay. The GI, if I need a colonoscopy, like, they're making sure everything's okay. But for the more layered issues, I'm usually going to an integrative provider that can look at things more
Yeah.
holistically. And that doesn't necessarily mean no medication ever, but I appreciate that they're able to kind of have a balanced perspective.
Yeah, totally. And usually a little bit slower and more thorough of even a visit, right? Which
Yeah.
that alone makes a big difference, just listening for longer and helping you for a longer period of time. Do you have any final thoughts for women that are suffering from a variety of these symptoms, and maybe they already are eating well or trying to stay active, and they just kind of feel stuck? I think that's a lot of women. So, do you have any advice for that group?
My advice would be like to find an integrative provider. Like if you're able to afford it, usually they're out of pocket, but I would say like that's what's made the biggest difference for me, is actually getting to root causes and finding guidance and doing the testing.
Awesome. And just as we finished here, how can listeners find you and your work and all of the awesome things that you're doing?
Yeah, you can find me at Less with More on Instagram, TikTok. I have a Substack where I send out like weekly emails with recipe ideas. And also I do a lot of like non-toxic cleaner swaps ideas for the home too. And yeah, you can find my recipes at lesswithlaura.com.